Imagine being accused of a crime you didn't commit, then facing a healthcare system that treats you like you're less than human. This is Aisha's story, a young black woman caught in a nightmare of injustice and racism. Stay with us as we follow her fight to survive and find hope against all odds. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the full journey. Aisha had never imagined her life would unfold like this. A 23-year-old woman trying to make ends meet in a neighborhood that seemed to swallow dreams whole. She worked tirelessly at a small hair salon nestled between rundown shops and empty lots, where the scent of old asphalt mingled with the faint aroma of hairspray. It wasn't much, but it was steady work. Between shifts, she cared for her mother, who was battling chronic illness and needed constant attention. Life had taught Aisha resilience, but some days the weight of it all felt unbearable. That evening, after a long 12-hour shift, she pulled her worn coat tighter around her thin frame and stepped out into the chilly air. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few scattered figures rushing home. The dull hum of distant traffic was interrupted by the screech of tires. A police cruiser rolled up beside her, and two officers stepped out, their faces serious under the streetlights. "Miss, stop right there," the taller officer commanded, voice low and sharp. Aisha froze, her heart pounding loudly against her ribs. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. "We need to check your bag," the other officer said without preamble. Hands trembling, Aisha lifted the strap of her bag from her shoulder, feeling the sudden cold grip of fear tighten around her chest. She had never done anything wrong, yet here she was, scrutinized and suspected. The taller officer opened her bag swiftly, his eyes narrowing as he pulled out a small package wrapped in plastic. "What's this?" he demanded, holding it up like evidence. Aisha's mouth went dry. "I don't know, it's not mine," she whispered, panic threatening to overtake her voice. The world started spinning. Her breaths came faster, shallower. Dizziness blurred her vision. She gripped the side of the police car for support, but her legs trembled violently beneath her. Officer Nathan, younger and with kinder eyes, stepped forward. "Hey, it's okay. Just breathe. We'll figure this out," he said, his voice soft but firm. But Aisha's panic transformed into something darker. Her heart raced uncontrollably, sweat beaded on her forehead, and her knees buckled. Before anyone could reach her, she collapsed onto the cold pavement, unconscious. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance as Nathan crouched beside her, concern etched deeply across his face. He glanced at his partner, who was already calling for backup. This was just the beginning. The sharp echo of the police radio filled the night air as Officer Nathan sat beside Aisha, her body limp but still breathing. His partner paced impatiently nearby, muttering about procedure and protocol, but Nathan's eyes never left her pale face. The package found in her bag, a small plastic bundle that looked suspicious enough, had sealed her fate in the eyes of the law. But Nathan wasn't convinced. "She's not some junkie," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "Look at her. Scared out of her mind." His partner scoffed. "You sure? Could just be another addict trying to talk her way out." Nathan didn't reply. Instead, he checked her pulse, rapid but weak, and saw the slight tremor in her fingers. Something was wrong beyond the obvious. She wasn't in control, and she wasn't a threat. "Listen," Nathan said finally, his voice steady but firm. "I'm taking her to the hospital. She needs medical attention, not a jail cell." His partner frowned, crossing his arms. "You're going against orders. You sure about this?" Nathan nodded. "Yeah. Sometimes you gotta do what's right, not what's easy." Carefully, he lifted Aisha into the back seat of the patrol car, her head lolling against the door. The city lights flickered past as they drove, a tense silence settling between them. Nathan stole glances at her every few minutes. The young woman was fragile, barely clinging to consciousness, and despite everything, she looked almost lost. At one point, Aisha's eyes fluttered open, confused and fearful. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hospital," Nathan replied gently. "You're safe now." Aisha's gaze searched his face, a flicker of trust breaking through her panic. "I didn't do anything," she said weakly. "I know," Nathan said. "We'll figure it out." When they arrived, the hospital was brightly lit and cold. Nathan helped her inside, only to be met with hostility almost immediately. At the reception desk stood a white woman with sharp eyes and a tight mouth, Nurse Karen. Karen glanced at Aisha, then back at Nathan, her tone dripping with contempt. "We don't treat uninsured criminals. Especially not druggies." Nathan stiffened. "She needs help." Karen shook her head. "No insurance, no service. Hospital policy." A tense silence stretched as Aisha lay barely conscious on the gurney, surrounded by cold indifference. Nathan's jaw clenched. He was caught between the rules and what he knew was right. The fight for Aisha's life had only just begun. The fluorescent lights above the hospital's waiting room flickered weakly, casting a sterile glare on the walls. Aisha lay slumped on the gurney, her body fragile, trembling slightly from exhaustion and the lingering effects of panic. The air was thick with the sharp scent of antiseptics and the low murmur of distant voices. But none of it mattered to the woman standing before them, Nurse Karen. Karen's eyes were cold, her mouth twisted into a sneer as she looked down at Aisha. "Look at you," she spat. "A junkie. A criminal. An animal." Her words were loud enough for others to hear, each one like a stab in Aisha's already bleeding heart. Nathan stepped forward, voice firm but measured. "She needs medical attention, now. You're required to treat her." Karen's gaze flicked to him, sharp as a knife. "Required? Maybe by law, but not by my conscience. We don't treat uninsured criminals. Especially not druggies." She emphasized the last word with venom, like it was a curse. Aisha, half-conscious, heard the words echoing around her like a cruel chorus. Her mind flashed back to her childhood, days filled with fear and silence. Her father, beaten and bruised after a wrongful arrest, had come home broken and defeated. The memory was vivid, raw. "This is how they want us to die," she whispered, voice shaking, quietly, forgotten. Nathan felt a surge of anger but also helplessness. He called the charge nurse again, pleading for assistance. Minutes later, a middle-aged doctor appeared. His face was weary, his eyes flicking uneasily between Karen and Nathan. "I'll see her," he said quietly. Nathan breathed a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. Moments later, after a hushed phone call and a glance towards Karen, the doctor excused himself. "Sorry, something urgent came up," he muttered and disappeared down the hall. Karen smiled thinly. "See? Even the doctors know better than to waste their time on uninsured criminals." Frustration boiled inside Nathan, but he kept his voice calm. "This isn't right. She's a human being." Karen shrugged, unconcerned. "That's not my problem." Aisha closed her eyes, trying to block out the humiliation. The sharpness of Karen's words cut deeper than any physical pain. She felt small, invisible, a problem to be ignored. But inside, a fire ignited. She was determined not to disappear quietly. Nathan stayed by her side, offering quiet reassurance, but the weight of the system's cruelty pressed down hard. He knew this wasn't just about one girl or one night. It was a reflection of a broken system designed to crush people like Aisha before they even had a chance. Aisha's breathing grew shallow. Her heartbeat was a frantic drum in her chest, and the room seemed to tilt and spin around her. The harsh fluorescent lights blurred into a haze of white as darkness tugged at the edges of her vision. Her knees buckled, and she felt Nathan's strong arms catch her before she hit the cold floor. "Hold on, Aisha," Nathan whispered, panic flashing in his eyes for the first time. "I'm not letting you go anywhere." She could barely focus, the world slipping away faster than she could hold on. The sharp, bitter taste of fear filled her mouth as she muttered, "Please, don't leave me." Nathan's voice was steady, but inside he was racing. The hospital's indifference was suffocating. He glanced over at Nurse Karen, who watched with thinly veiled annoyance but did nothing. "This isn't happening," he said under his breath. "Not here." Without waiting for approval, Nathan scooped Aisha up into his arms and rushed to the door. The security guard stepped forward, blocking the way. "You can't take her out like that." Nathan didn't answer. Instead, he pressed the emergency button on his radio and called a favor, a friend who was a doctor at a nearby private clinic known for taking difficult cases, regardless of insurance. "Hang on," Nathan said firmly, his voice filled with resolve. "I'm getting you help." The drive to the private clinic was tense. Aisha's eyes fluttered open occasionally, catching glimpses of Nathan's worried face. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't do it," she said. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. "I know. We'll figure this out." As her consciousness faded, a memory surfaced, how the incriminating package ended up in her bag. It wasn't hers. Aisha recalled the panic when her friend, Tasha, had begged her to watch her purse for just a moment during a party. Inside was a small, sealed baggie, something Aisha never wanted to be involved with. Aisha's heart pounded as the flashback played, Tasha's hurried whispers, the heavy footsteps of police closing in, and the moment she realized she'd been set up. Nathan's car pulled up at the clinic, where a small but welcoming reception awaited. The doctor on call greeted them with a professional calm that felt like a lifeline. "We'll take care of her," the doctor assured Nathan. Nathan stayed by Aisha's side as they wheeled her inside. The battle was far from over, but at least now, Hope had a chance to breathe. The small examination room was a stark contrast to the cold hospital corridors. Soft lighting and the faint scent of lavender filled the air. Aisha lay on the examination table, pale but stable, wrapped in a thin hospital gown. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound breaking the silence, except for Nathan's quiet footsteps as he paced nearby. Nathan hadn't left her side since they arrived. The weight of the day, the injustice, and the constant uncertainty pressed down on him. He sank onto a plastic chair, running a hand through his hair, eyes distant. "This place is different," Nathan finally said, breaking the silence. "People here care. They don't see you as a problem, just a person who needs help." Aisha managed a weak smile. "I can't believe how lucky I am that you were there. Most cops wouldn't have cared." Nathan looked up, his gaze intense. "That's the problem. The system doesn't care. But I want to change that." Aisha's eyes softened, grateful yet guarded. "I don't know if I can trust anyone, especially a cop." Nathan nodded, accepting the truth. "You don't have to. But I'm not like the others." She took a shallow breath, the tension in her body easing a little. "My mom's sick. I'm all she's got. I was working 2 jobs and going to night school, trying to keep everything together." Nathan listened, the pieces falling into place. "Why would someone set you up?" Aisha's voice cracked. "Tasha, my friend, she got mixed up with the wrong people. I was just trying to help her. I didn't know the bag had anything in it." The vulnerability in her voice was real, raw. Nathan felt a protective urge rise inside him. For a moment, the barrier between cop and civilian, between black and white, seemed to melt away. They were just 2 people caught in a broken system. The nurse who had refused to help earlier flashed across Nathan's mind, a bitter reminder of the obstacles ahead. Aisha's phone buzzed quietly on the counter. She glanced at it, hesitating before answering. "Hey, Mom," she said softly. "I'm okay. At the clinic now." Her mother's weak voice was a balm, but also a reminder the fight was far from over. Nathan stood, determination hardening his features. "I'm going to do everything I can to help you, Aisha. You won't face this alone." A flicker of hope shone in her eyes as the night deepened outside the clinic window. Aisha stepped out of the private clinic with a fragile hope clinging to her heart. The sterile walls behind her seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality awaiting outside. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the neighborhood's familiar dim streetlights flickered in the early evening glow. Nathan walked beside her, carrying the weight of everything that had happened. The fresh air was heavy with the scent of damp asphalt and distant traffic, but for Aisha, the oppressive pressure of her situation was suffocating. "The bill," she whispered, eyes fixed on the cracked sidewalk. "It's $9,000. Just for one night." Nathan's jaw tightened. "That's outrageous." Aisha shook her head slowly, tears threatening to spill. "I don't have that kind of money. I don't even know how I'll pay rent this month. Or buy groceries. My mom, she's worse than ever. I left her alone all day." They arrived at her small apartment building, a rundown structure on the edge of the city, where peeling paint and broken windows told stories of neglect and hardship. Inside, the narrow hallway was dim and smelled faintly of mold and despair. The door to apartment 4B creaked open, and Aisha's mother, an elderly woman with tired eyes and a fragile frame, looked up. Her face lit briefly with hope at the sight of her daughter, but pain quickly replaced it. "Baby," her mother rasped, voice weak but warm. Aisha crossed the room and sat beside her, taking her frail hand. "I'm here now. I'm going to fix this." Her mother coughed, and the sound shook the room. "You've already done so much, Aisha." Nathan lingered near the doorway, watching the scene. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts, then dialed. "Hey, it's me," he said quietly. "I need some help with a friend of mine. She's in a tough spot." Minutes later, Nathan returned with a bag of groceries and a stack of pamphlets from local aid organizations. "This should help for now." Aisha smiled weakly, overwhelmed by the kindness but aware of the fragility surrounding her. That night, as Aisha lay on the threadbare couch, the weight of her medical bill pressed on her mind like a stone. Every minute of hospital care, every test, every medication added to the impossible debt she now faced. Nathan sat beside her, his own thoughts heavy. "I'm going to look into this," he promised. "There's more to your case than just drugs. I can feel it." Aisha closed her eyes, exhausted but clinging to that promise. She knew the road ahead was long and brutal. Days passed with tense uncertainty. Nathan visited often, bringing news and small comforts. Each time, Aisha shared more about her life, the hope she once had, the dreams deferred, the constant fight just to survive. Nathan found himself questioning the system he worked for. The stark contrast between the compassion he felt for Aisha and the cold bureaucracy she faced gnawed at his conscience. He began digging deeper, seeking information beyond official reports. The truth was hidden beneath layers of prejudice and fear. For Aisha, every day was a struggle against despair. But with Nathan's support, a fragile seed of hope began to grow. Nathan sat at his cluttered desk, the dim light of his desk lamp casting long shadows over piles of case files and notes. His mind was tangled in the threads of Aisha's situation, a young woman caught in a storm of false accusations and systemic neglect. The more he searched, the clearer it became that the official story didn't add up. He typed rapidly, scrolling through police records, court documents, and incident reports. The name Tasha kept popping up, the same friend Aisha had mentioned, with a troubling past. Arrested multiple times for drug-related offenses, Tasha's history painted a dark picture. But Nathan sensed there was more beneath the surface. His phone buzzed. A message from an old contact, a defense attorney known for fighting racial profiling cases. Nathan quickly called. "Lena, it's Nathan. I've got a case, a young woman, Aisha. She was set up with drugs she didn't know about. I need your help." There was a pause, then a firm, understanding voice. "Send me everything you have. I'll review it tonight." Nathan felt a flicker of relief. Finally, a step forward. Back at Aisha's apartment, the tension was thick. She paced nervously, thoughts racing. Trust didn't come easy, especially with cops. But Nathan's visits were different, no judgment, just genuine concern. When Nathan arrived that evening, he found her sitting quietly, a book unopened on her lap. "I met a lawyer," he said, settling down. "She believes there's enough to fight this. We can challenge the evidence, prove you were set up." Aisha's eyes widened, hope battling skepticism. "Why are you doing this for me?" Nathan shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Because sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Tasha, looking nervous, eyes darting. "I need to talk," she said hurriedly. "I'm sorry, Aisha. I never meant for you to get caught up in this." Aisha's anger flared, but Nathan raised a hand. "Let's hear her out." Tasha explained how she had hidden the drugs in Aisha's bag, hoping to avoid detection herself. Fearful and desperate, she admitted her mistakes but pleaded for a chance to make things right. Nathan's mind raced. This confession was crucial, but it wasn't enough to erase the damage done. Over the next days, Nathan and Lena worked tirelessly, gathering statements, piecing together timelines, and preparing for court. The system was daunting, but the team was determined. Aisha grappled with her emotions, betrayal, fear, but also a stubborn resolve. She wasn't going down without a fight. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs and tension as Aisha sat quietly on the defendant's bench, feeling the heavy weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. Across the room, the prosecutor, a young, sharp-eyed man, readied himself to push for a harsh sentence. Next to Aisha, her attorney Lena sat calm and resolute, a pillar of strength in the storm. Nathan stood at the back, his police uniform crisp but his heart heavy. This wasn't justice. The system he'd trusted was tearing apart a young woman's life based on lies and prejudice. The prosecutor rose first, his voice cold and unwavering. "The evidence is clear. The defendant was found with illegal narcotics. She intended to distribute these substances, endangering our community. We ask for the court to deliver a strict punishment." Lena stood smoothly, her tone measured but passionate. "Your Honor, the evidence is deeply flawed. My client, Aisha Thompson, is a victim of manipulation and racial profiling. The drugs were planted. We have witness statements and proof that this case is a setup designed to scapegoat her unfairly." The judge nodded, allowing Lena to continue. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened, and Nurse Karen walked in. Her cold glare swept over the room as she took the witness stand. The tension rose palpably. As she spoke, it became clear that her testimony was laced with bias. "This woman was a drug user, a criminal," she said harshly. "We don't treat uninsured criminals, especially not druggies." Lena pounced on the contradictions and prejudice, skillfully dismantling Karen's credibility. Under intense questioning, the nurse's demeanor grew defensive, her words inconsistent. Aisha listened, heart pounding, as the ugly truth of systemic racism and personal hatred was laid bare before the court. When the judge finally turned to Aisha and granted her the chance to speak, she rose slowly. Her voice was quiet but firm, carrying the weight of every insult, every struggle, every injustice she had faced. This isn't just about me, Aisha said steadily. It's about a system that wants us to suffer in silence. About people who judge us before they listen. I am not a criminal. I am a daughter, a sister, a friend, and I refuse to be erased. A hush fell over the courtroom, a silence louder than any verdict. This trial was no longer just a fight for Aisha's freedom. It was a fight for her dignity, her humanity, and a demand for justice in a broken system. The courtroom was silent as the judge leaned forward, carefully reviewing the evidence laid out over weeks of testimony. The tension was thick. Every breath seemed heavier than the last. Aisha sat, hands clenched tightly in her lap, bracing herself for the final decision. Judge Harmon cleared his throat. After considering all the evidence, testimonies, and circumstances, the court finds significant doubt regarding the integrity of the evidence against the defendant. A small ripple of surprise ran through the room. Therefore, the charges against Ms. Thompson are dismissed. Relief flooded Aisha's body like a sudden downpour, but it was quickly tempered by a sharp sting of reality. However, the judge continued, the court cannot excuse the outstanding medical bills incurred during Ms. Thompson's treatment. It remains her responsibility to cover these costs. Aisha's heart sank. The legal battle might be over, but the crushing weight of debt was still looming over her like a dark cloud. Nathan watched quietly from the back, feeling both victorious and helpless. The system had allowed Aisha to walk free, but it had not freed her from the very real consequences of the injustice she had endured. Back at her small apartment, the air felt heavy. Aisha sat on the worn couch, a stack of bills spread before her like an insurmountable mountain. The $9,000 medical bill gleamed harshly under the dim light. Her mother, frail and coughing, lay on the bed nearby. Aisha's eyes welled with tears. The fight wasn't just legal, it was a fight to keep her family afloat. But even in that crushing moment, a small flame of determination flickered inside her. She would not let this defeat break her. She would find a way to survive, to keep pushing, to demand justice not just for herself, but for everyone caught in the cracks of a broken system. Nathan visited often, bringing groceries, offering what support he could. His own disillusionment with the police force grew with each visit. He quietly began researching options, reaching out to activists and lawyers who might help. Together, though from different worlds, they forged a fragile alliance against the overwhelming tide of injustice. Aisha looked out the window one evening, the city lights flickering below, and whispered to herself, "This isn't the end." It had been nearly a month since the courtroom emptied and Aisha had walked free. Though the judge's decision had cleared her name, the fight was far from over. The crushing weight of the $9,000 medical bill still sat like a boulder on her chest. Every day, she stared at the stack of notices and bills that arrived like clockwork, reminders that the system that let her go still demanded a price she couldn't afford. But something inside her had changed. Gone was the hollow despair of those first days after release. Instead, there was a quiet determination, a steady flame of resilience that refused to be extinguished. It was that fire that drove her to the community center on the far side of town, where a nonprofit organization worked tirelessly to help people just like her, people crushed under the weight of medical debt and systemic neglect. Each morning, Aisha arrived early, settling into her small desk cluttered with pamphlets and phone lists. She answered calls from frightened families, nervous patients, and exhausted single parents. She shared her story openly, the fear, the injustice, the humiliation, and listened to theirs. Through these conversations, she found not just purpose, but a kind of healing. Her voice, once shaky and uncertain, grew stronger with each passing day. The words flowed with conviction now, laced with empathy forged by experience. One particular call stuck with her. A young mother, much like herself, was struggling to keep her child alive while drowning in bills. Aisha listened as the woman's voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. She promised to connect her to resources to help shoulder the burden. That conversation was a reminder. She was no longer alone, and neither was anyone else trapped in the system's cruel machinery. Meanwhile, Nathan had made a decision of his own. The months following the incident had taken a toll on him, the frustration of working within a flawed system, the helplessness in the face of injustice. After long nights wrestling with his conscience, he resigned from the police force. Now, he was enrolled in a social work program, aiming to support communities directly, to be the change he wished he could have been while in uniform. One late afternoon, Nathan came to visit Aisha at the community center, carrying a bag of groceries and a stack of brightly colored flyers promoting healthcare rights. "I thought you might need these," he said softly, placing the groceries on the counter. Aisha looked up from her paperwork, genuine warmth blooming in her tired eyes. "Thank you." Nathan. For everything. He smiled faintly. You're doing amazing work here. They sat together for a few moments, the hum of the center around them, talking about the uphill battle ahead. Nathan confessed his doubts and fears, while Aisha shared her cautious hope. We can't fix the whole system overnight, she said, but every voice, every small victory, matters. Nathan nodded. And sometimes, standing together makes all the difference. As dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Aisha stepped outside, holding one of the flyers in her hands. The bold slogan printed across it caught the fading light. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. She whispered to the quiet city below. They tried to erase me, but I'm still here. Her journey was far from over. The road ahead was long and fraught with challenges. The scars of her experience would remain, reminders of the price she had paid. But through pain, betrayal, and struggle, Aisha had found a voice that would not be silenced, a voice that would fight for those who had none. Her story was no longer just about survival. It was about resistance, about hope, about demanding the dignity every person deserves. And for the first time in a long time, Aisha believed in the possibility of change.